Now, as far as the pretrial process, we're going to come back to look at plea bargaining and some of the controversy around that issue, but for now, we'll just kind of keep chugging away through the process. In a criminal case, if you want a jury trial, you are guaranteed a jury trial. Doesn't matter if we're talking about state or federal level, level of court. And you are guaranteed that by the Sixth Amendment. It's that positive right that guarantees you a speedy public trial with a jury and political representation if you can't afford it. In a federal civil case, at least, this only applies to federal civil cases, but the Seventh Amendment guarantees you a jury trial unless you signed it away with an arbitration clause in a contract. And then the amendment really can't help you. Now, that said, a lot of states also offer jury trials for civil cases. Right? Missouri is one of those. And yeah, if you don't want a jury, and there are some cases where you might not, you can, if you're a criminal defendant, request a bench trial. If it's a civil case, plaintiff or defendant could request a bench trial. Depending on the jurisdiction, you might have different arrangements for how they have to agree on what kind of trial to have. But again, in a criminal case, the defendant is always the one who can choose whether it's going to be a bench or a jury trial. It's not something the prosecution can determine. Does everybody have all of that? Oh, the other part of the pretrial process, and I know this, just all of this, we'll look at the controversy around plea bargaining is more interesting than it is as we just move through it, but we'll come back to it. Also, jury selection. It just seems like it should be a horribly boring thing. It is to go through it, but it's very important and a lot more controversial than you might think. But let's get some of that boring stuff knocked out first. To be a juror, you have to be a U.S. citizen. You have to be at least 18. So there you go, Caitlin. There's one more thing you can do. Right? You're going to have to wait until you can buy that pouch of Red Man you've been hankering after your entire life. But you can at least serve on a jury. Yay! Welcome to the age of majority. It's just not all it's cracked up to be. All right. And you have to be able to speak English. And that's just because of the way the courts work. This is not some intentionally discriminatory thing. And you need to, especially if it's a trial at the state level, you need to be a resident of that state. And serving on a jury is one of your obligations as a citizen. Right? I know I told you previously, voting is, despite what you're told in your government class, and answer it the right way in your government class, voting is not something that's really an obligation or a duty for citizens. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. But serving on a jury is something you have to do. If they call you up, you have to go do it. There are some professions that may be exempt. This is less and less common, it seems. For example, in the past, physicians were able to get out of this. Members of clergy were able to get out of it, but very few exceptions. And I'm going to guess today a lot of physicians would not be. I mean, if you're Dr. Schwabe at Mosaic and you perform life-saving surgeries and there just aren't that many of you around, you could probably get out of it. You may be able to get out due to hardship, but that's also tough. But if you're caring for like a terminally ill family member or a spouse with dementia or something else that will make you equally sad on this Tuesday afternoon, that might get you out of it. But again, there are fewer and fewer exceptions. Those of you that go away to school, that will get you out of jury duty for now. Yes, Caitlin.
Isn't there certain medical conditions or mental health conditions that can get you out?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you had PTSD and they brought you in for a murder trial, that might get you out. There are all kinds of ways to get out of jury duty. I'm not suggesting you pretend like you don't speak English. I've done that before, but not to get out of jury duty. It's to avoid a scam in Turkey, but that's a different story. You could say just anything could get you out. Sarah Silverman, do you guys know who Sarah Silverman is? She's a comedian. She's a little older, but she advised in a joke that turned out not to have gone over very well, that if you use racial slurs when they're talking to you, you will get out of jury duty very quickly. I don't recommend doing that. Personally, I would love to get put on a jury, but they probably won't put me on one for reasons we'll find out. And it's not because I'm a felon. That was not a segue to that next thing. I am not a felon, at least not a convicted one. We're all felons. There are so many felonies that you can't go through life without committing a felony. You can ask Officer Davis. He and I just talked about this last week. Right? There's even a guy I think he wrote a book called 3 Felonies a Day about just how easy it is to commit a felony without knowing it in America.
Well, you gotta wake up on a certain night.
What's that?
You gotta wake up on
Well, no, there's all kinds of, if you just, look at the labels on, an aerosol product, that it's a violation of federal something or other to use this in a way inconsistent with its labeling. There might be a felony in that. All kinds of stuff. Yeah, Bridget. Yes. Now, you can tear it off as the consumer, but yeah, if you work at a mattress store and you accidentally snag it with a zipper on your jacket, there you go. Right? Federal offense. Just as another example that was, I don't know if it would have risen to the level of a felony, but we used to have a neighbor who would invite people to a Halloween party, and he'd always just take the invitation and stick it in your mailbox. Well, it's a federal offense of some level because it's not postage paid, and you can't open somebody's mailbox and put stuff in it. All of that kind of stuff. So jury selection, this will kind of get us towards where some of the controversy comes in. Okay. So the county clerk comes up with the whole list of eligible jurors. Right, this is the farthest I've ever got. So I was away at the University of Kansas when these things came in, and my mother, this is going to sound like I have a helicopter mom, really quite the opposite, but she did save me from dealing with the paperwork, and she would always just call down to the county court and just say he goes to school out of state. That was the end of it. So they will go through the pool that way. They'll screen. Screening comes in once they've got the actual physical people. You'll show up. If you're not able to claim some kind of exemption, you'll show up the day of jury selection. And then they're going to throw some Latin stuff at you. Yes, Caitlin.
So when I'm away at KU...
When you're away at KU.
My mom can just say... No.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and that will be that simple. Or they just haven't caught me yet. But I think they know where to find me. Yeah, you should be all right. So the voir dire process, they place you under oath. All right, tell the whole truth, nothing but the truth, all this stuff, answer the questions. They're looking at this point for some kind of bias you might have. Maybe it's a pro-law enforcement bias, anti-law enforcement bias, racism, right, against people of a certain religious group. So any kind of bias or prejudice on the part of a juror. And this will result in some of the candidates being cut out of the pool. This is called removal for cause, where the lawyer can articulate a reason. I am excluding Justin from the jury pool because Justin is a banker and the person accused of this crime is accused of robbing a bank. Right? So we just don't think that Justin can be unbiased here. That would be removal for cause. But there are also a certain number of peremptory challenges that are allowed to an attorney. And this is where they can just say, you know what, Dakota, I don't think we'll take you. Why not? Well, we don't have to tell you. It's a peremptory challenge. We don't have to explain why we don't want you. We just don't. And in the end, you get a half a dozen or a dozen jurors. And we will stop there so that you've got time for your exit slip. Please upload these notes. Tomorrow we'll kind of take a step back and consider the pretrial process.
Do you want us to go ahead and turn these in?
Yeah, I know they are not complete. Go ahead and turn them in. That way you can get the 5 points for today.